on the millennial generation. The generation now makes up over 1/4 of total U.S. population. Over 80 million potential votes for the presidential candidates to court. Joining me right now is Millennial Generation author and Run for America CEO David Burstein, All In Together founder Lauren Leader-Chivee, and Milken Institute senior fellow Jackson Mueller. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the millennial vote. And I know for a long time, Lauren, we've been talking about younger generations going for Bernie Sanders. Do you think that's an accurate statement?
Well, it has been, and I think he's really captured something about the sort of the passion and the energy that young Americans have today and the issues that they care about. I do think in the general election that we will see some shifts, and the benefit that Bernie has had in engaging and energizing these young voters is historically millennials have not voted in high numbers, and so the huge benefit certainly for the Democrats is that he's gotten them excited about the political process and sort of engaged them enough that hopefully they'll turn out more seriously in the general, which they have historically not done.
And you could say that for Donald Trump as well. Donald Trump is bringing out people who have not voted before Jackson and getting voter turnout way up.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, we're seeing numbers across the board in most states, incredibly high in the Republican turnout. And, whether that translates into higher turnout in the general election, we'll have to see.
David, what are the most important issues, do you think, for the millennial generation?
I think, young voters care about the issues that all voters care about. They care about jobs, they care about the environment. I think really what we're looking at this election, and frankly the reason why Bernie Sanders is resonating so much with young voters, is this question of authenticity. People are looking for a leader that they feel like this person is not bought, they're not paid for, and I actually think, Donald Trump might be resonating more with younger voters if his rhetoric weren't so angry and particularly negative. There's a certain kind of frustration that Bernie Sanders espouses, but it's guised in a more sort of positive tone, and particularly where he stands on issues like gay marriage, which is, a important issue for a lot of young people, in that if you're against it, it's very difficult to get the vote of people in this generation.
Which is more than rhetoric. I mean, it's more than rhetoric. Look, the millennial generation is the most diverse generation in American history. They've grown up in communities, in diverse communities. There's more multiracial millennials than there's ever been in any generation in history. So I think for many millennials, these sort of diversity issues, the questions of embracing people who are different, instead of, it's been much more than rhetoric on the Trump side. I think that's going to be a serious issue for him with young voters. They absolutely will not support that kind of.
So you don't think they're going to come out for Donald Trump in the general election?
Well, look, there will always be some, hardcore Republican voters who are passionate about him. That's not to say they won't, but I think on balance, the majority of millennials are going to vote Democratic in the general, and that's the demographic the Republicans know about. They've been watching for a long time and have been concerned about. It was their concern that the election would go in this kind of a direction. It's not good for Republicans generally.
Just to add beyond the rhetoric, I think if you're looking at a big issue today, it's the economy, right? The economy is changing as people kind of come out of school. Real wages have been depressed for years. They have a lot of student debt. And quite frankly, they are financially stressed as soon as they enter the workforce. And yeah.
But, I mean, Bernie Sanders is saying free college. I mean, do you actually believe that you're going to get free college?
Well, I mean, if I was looking at a candidate 10 years ago when I was looking for a college, I would definitely go with Bernie Sanders. I mean, I would love to not have any student loan debt.
But it's not going to happen, is what I'm saying.
Right.
It's just
not.
It's
a
not realistic.
pie in the sky fantasy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think millennials are looking for a leader who espouses their values. I mean, we have to remember that most of the things that most of the presidential candidates are up there talking about are unlikely to happen, or unlikely to happen in anything close to the form in which people are putting them forward in. I mean, there's not going to be a wall that's going to be built because Congress isn't going to approve it.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to keep that in mind when we're looking at how this generation votes. They vote on values. And I do think that as a result, you're actually going to see a very low turnout among young people in the general election.
You do,
right?
huh?
I think,
Wow.
I think that young people will break overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton over someone like a Donald Trump. But, the way that Bernie Sanders has energized and mobilized them, there's a real enthusiasm gap that exists among people in this generation. You saw it in what happened in 2012. Well, more young people actually turned out in 2012 than did in 2008 for the president. They were not as enthusiastic or vocal in doing it, and I think this cycle we're actually going to see a lower turnout of people in this generation.
There's either enthusiasm or there's opposition that motivates people to vote. And for me, if I mean, I don't think there's any question that I don't think we're going to see a change in policy or a change in attitude from Donald Trump between now and the general. And I think that will actually enormously motivate young voters who find the sort of anti-immigrant, anti-minority rhetoric from Trump to be deeply offensive, and that will motivate them. And I think that, yeah, it will, because it is so, if you talk about values, it is absolutely an anathema to the values of probably the majority of millennials.
I would be interested in hearing more from, Donald Trump about his policy views, right? I mean, he's, we see a lot of rhetoric coming out of him, right? But we don't see actual policy initiatives. And I mean, his first one that he did was about a foreign policy, and I think that was, so-so. So.
All right, we will leave it there. David.